the door and he just starts scratching the door, which is even worse. And then I can't put him anywhere. So it's just, all right. Hey, welcome everyone. We're going to be, it is my pleasure to be joined once again by Jake Phillips from the Culture Bumpkin. How you doing, my man?
Good to see you, TJ.
Oh, it's fantastic. So we just had I think what's this is April, so it would have been like I think February or early March. Jake and I were talking and he's like, hey, we got to get together again sometime. But boy, I got really over eager in March. I swear I scheduled, I'm not joking, it was at least 12 different interviews throughout the month of March. I had one every Sunday and then most Saturdays. And then I also do the Left Wing podcast, which you guys should all check out sometime, Left Wing Pod, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So for like 3 or 4 days every week of March, I had something to do on YouTube. And that's separate from like what I'm trying to do on my own YouTube channel and on TikTok. I was like, oh man, March is booked. I had March completely booked. Oh, the first I was like, oh, we got it. So April finally started. Like, oh yeah, let's get back together. We didn't have a topic, and we settled on our top 5 favorite Bible stories. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited about this.
Me too. Yeah, I'm a big fan of antiquity, and yeah,
it's gonna be good. So I'm sure you thought about this as well, but we're picking our top 5 favorite Bible stories, and I tried not to go with some obvious ones, heavy on the obvious one, because we'd have some overlap. And so I think I have 2 that are going to be very, very well-known Bible stories. Like I think most people would know them, like whether they went to church or not. And then 3 of them are on the not like super obscure, but a little less obscure side. So try to prevent some of that. But I too am a big fan of antiquity when it comes to stories, because there's a reason that these stories last so long, because they're good. They're good stories. And I don't know who said it, but there's like only 7 or 8 types of stories you can tell or something. Yeah. I heard some literature guy talk about that, different ways to construct a story. And it's kind of true. Like they all kind of have a similar theme to them over time, but some are just better than others. And a lot of Bible stories are really, really good. So we'll go ahead and kick things off. And you're the guest, good sir. So what is your number 5?
Well, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you, right? For sheer, like, it almost depends. Like, is it sheer entertainment value? Like, just story?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if that's the case, is that the case? Like, it's just
that's what I went by. I went by
make a movie of this or something like that.
Oh, that's so. All right. Okay. All right, I'd say 4 of them are for sheer entertainment value, and my number 1 is entertainment, and it's incredibly moving and powerful. The story is just so good that it's just it's both for me. So I tried to lean more on the entertainment, but you can't lose either way, honestly.
Right. Okay, so my number 5 in that case would be, it's from the book of Judges, and it's about a guy named Abimelech.
Ooh.
And it's a classic story of poetic justice, right? Because Abimelech is a real rascal. He was basically hired to be a hitman, so he killed his own relatives, his own friends, in order to kind of get power, which was very common in the old days. And in one particular town, these guys, basically they paid him his, 30 pieces of silver, so to speak, out of this treasury in this certain, out of this Tower of Siloam or something like, I forget the name of it, but it's like a certain tower. And I can look it up, but so they give him this blood money.
Mm-hmm.
Then they double cross him, and he comes and attacks them. They flee into that tower that they paid him the blood money out of, and then it was wooden, and he burns it down around their ears. So then he's like, well, that actually works pretty well. I'm going to do that again. So the next tower he goes to. I'm laughing at
it.
Right. It's a good story.
It's good.
And so he says, well, shoot, that tactic worked. I'm going to do that again. Kind of like Custer, riding through the Indian villages. It worked about 9 times. And on the 10th time, it didn't work. And so he comes up to this tower, surrounds it. And he's up there looking around. And this woman on the inside of the tower has there's a piece of millstone. She takes this rock and just goes, boom, and just rolls it off, smashes him in the head, fractures his skull. And then he's laying there and he's like, oh, to his armor bearer, kill me. I don't want anybody to know a woman killed me. It's like the fact that, jokes on him, thousands of years later, we're still reading about it, that the woman broke his head in half. So I don't know. I really like that story.
It is great. When I first started, I remember hearing the story as a kid, and it was just, at first it was weird to me because it's like, all right, man, a woman killed you, but who wouldn't have died if someone dropped a giant rock? Or what are you ashamed of? Like, where's the embarrassment there? I mean, she literally got the drop on you. It could happen. It doesn't make you any less of a warrior. And it didn't make any sense to me, but it is in like the cruel irony or the hilarious irony that his dying wish was that someone else would kill him so he wouldn't have been known that a woman did it. And now that's if anyone even knows the name of them, like that's the only thing they can tell you about him. That's what it's just really funny.
Right. And, talk about a wild technicality. It's like your brains are hanging out. And you're like, oh, finish me off. Okay, good. It's you.
Exactly. Yeah. She killed you either way, buddy. Yeah. Come on.
Well, the woman got the kill. If this was Call of Duty, she would get the kill.
If the military's racking up the confirmed kills, it's going to her. Come on. We all know what's going on here. All right. That was good. I didn't think it would be a Abimelech one. That one's fantastic. I like those stories when first off, I think of just the concept of falling on your own sword or something like that, and or having your armor bearer do it for you, or like in, what is it called in Japan? Seppuku, I think.
Yeah, there's a couple different words. I don't know if it has anything to do with like the shape of the wound. Like harikari is like ritual suicide, but there's another name too. I know. Yeah. I know you're right.
Yeah, it's like, man, I can't. Things are gonna be pretty bad before something. Like, I gotta say, I don't know. Like seeing how shockingly common that was. I mean, I'd have to have a horrible fadeaway. But then in the end, they also had someone to help you do it because it's not an easy task or something like that. And that you kind of sign up for that as armor bearers. Like, yeah, listen, just so you know, buddy, if things start going bad, I'm gonna need you to, take care of this and everything. Just part of the job description. So, my number 5 is probably the best known Bible story, or in the top 3 of all time. It's going to be David and Goliath is the one I'm going with here. And was that on your list at all?
Yes.
Okay, all right, cool. So we can talk about it together. That's cool. I figured this would happen sometimes. But so I went with David and Goliath. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the character of King David in the Bible, David has he may have the most written about him of any person in the Bible. I mean, his story spans like 4 books, basically, like Samuel and Kings and everything. And it starts off when Samuel he anoints David as a child to be the next king, or the next king of Israel. And he's the youngest brother. It's a real rags to riches type of story and everything. And David's star first rose when he slayed, is it slain or slew Goliath? I don't know. However the English works on that. But he was a 17-year-old shepherd. Tough kid. The Bible mentioned that he had already killed a lion and a bear with his sling. By the way, not a slingshot, folks. It was a sling, which is an incredibly deadly weapon. Like, it was an actual weapon that people used in ancient militaries, where it almost hit you like a rock give the force of a bullet. I mean, it could pierce armor and stuff. So the story of David and Goliath starts off with David's brothers are in the military, and they're off to face the Philistines. And David's father sends David out with some bread and some cheese to hand his brothers in the field. So, say again.
A care package.
Exactly. It's a care package. Oh, wait. Jail and the tent page.
Oh, that's a good one, Heather. That's actually on my list as well.
Oh,
I love that one.
You got a lot of women killing, killing dudes.
Well, I mean, women have some of the most spectacular kills in the Bible.
They do. They do.
Brock, tent peg.
Just the tent peg is a good one. All right, we'll get to that one. But all right, so I'm going to read here. This is from 1 Samuel 17. And this is like the excerpt I picked here for David and Goliath. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, roughly 9 feet, or I'm sorry, roughly 10 feet. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass, roughly 150 pounds. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. And the spear weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield that went before him. So that spear would have been about 5 feet, about between 10 and 25 pounds. Like, it's hard to get ancient measurements exactly, but that's about what it'd be. So heavy stuff. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man, that way we may fight. We may fight together. So he's out here just, talking all types of trash to the Israelites. And so David's there with his care package, we're all his brothers. And David spoke unto them that said, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard this when he spoke unto the men and said, his anger was kindled against David. Why comest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the haughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou might see his battle. And David said, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? I love that. I love that part when David's like, aren't we standing for something here? Are we not men? Are we not going to just let this guy insult us, our country, and our God? And so the rest of the story, you guys know how it goes. He volunteers to go fight against Goliath. Everyone says, are you crazy? You're a 17-year-old kid. The king, Saul, says, all right, man, well, let's get you some armor. The armor's too big for him. He can't wear it. He's like, no, I don't need the armor protection. I have the power of God. He goes down to a brook and picks up 5 stones, and he used the stone. Goliath laughs in his face. He launches it, kills Goliath, decapitates him, and there's a big victory. David becomes a rock star. Now, first off, I love the story. I love the build up that it starts with David. It's kind of like a movie, how it just starts off when he's just, with his family and everything. No one has confidence in him. His brothers think he's just there to see the action or something. He's like, no, I'm about this life. Let's go. And he's not going to stand there and listen to people and listen to this one guy and this literal giant insult him and his nation and his God. Now, the funny thing about the story is that David originally, if you read the King James version, which is what I read, because I love the King James version of the Bible. It sounds amazing. It's hard. It's actually, when I was in school, I would use the New American Standard Bible because that's a better, more solid translation of the King James. It just doesn't sound as good. It just doesn't. I love the way it flows with the King James. But if you read the New American Standard Bible, which goes by, the preponderance of the text and the oldest text, like the ones that are more likely to be accurate, David wasn't the one who killed Goliath. If you read in 2 Samuel 2:19, it will say, I wrote down his name, but I lost it. But the guy who killed, it says that there was a man named Eliam who killed Goliath of Gath, the giant. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought David killed it, but it was just retcon later, to put David in there to make it sound cooler because, he was the king and you had to kind of build the story. So poor Eliab. Oh, and in the KJV, they caught that. And so in the KJV, in that verse where it says Eliab killed Goliath, in the KJV, it says Eliab killed the brother of Goliath, which is not what it says in the older text, but that's just a fascinating story where people retcon or whatever. Doesn't take away from the story of David and Goliath. It's just a cool story. So that's my number 5.
I think the significance of him grabbing 5 stones is extraordinarily shows confidence. Do you know why?
His brothers?
He had 4 brothers.
His brothers, yeah. he was doing a lot of giant killing that day.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna march on Gath and finish the job.
Case any the rest of them get any ideas, we're gonna.
No, I'm of the camp that says that now the New American Standard it has some older manuscripts that it comes from, but the King James translators had access to those. Like I think it's the King James is correct in that David killed him, and then years later, they basically kill the rest of the family, because that was a giant family. You know what I mean? Like, according to the story. Either way, it's a great story.
There's I know what you're referencing. Later on, there's David sends some other guys to finish off when he's king. It's like a lot later in there. And that part, because he kills Goliath's brother, one of them has 6 fingers. They tell a story about one of Goliath's brothers is 6-fingered. And that I've always remembered that passage, first because the 6-fingered guy, you're not going to forget that. But also because one of the guys he sent, his name was He-Man. I don't know if you ever saw that, but, which was, I don't know, it was very
blonde
funny.
hair, kind of.
Yeah, I know, right? And there's happy for the girl power on the list. Yeah, he's like, so my list is all dudes, unfortunately, but it wasn't originally. Okay. I had Esther on the list as well. She was on the list, or the story of Esther, but I don't know, the story was kind of long, and like it just kind of stretched out to me, so it was hard to fit that on there. But she's the honorable mentions. But my auntie, my favorite show as a kid was He-Man, and so my auntie always called me He-Man. She still calls me He-Man to this day. So when I found a character in the Bible that was sent to kill Goliath's brothers named He-Man, like, oh, that's awesome, that's great. So it's like, I'm all about it.
That's all. And it even says, I mean, apparently it was years later, because David was older, and it said that giant, like, they basically pulled him back. I was like, you're too old and decrepit to be doing this. You did, we remember what you did when you were younger.
You have nothing to prove, old man.
Go sit back in the Humvee. So mine, another spectacular kill, what Heather already mentioned, is Jael. The wife of Heber the Kenite, which is, and I would love to know the backstory on what Sisera did. Like, I don't know if he came through and was rude to them. I don't know. But apparently, because the Kenites were allies with Sisera, so there's no reason for her to do that.
What was the beef?
But she did. And so Sisera comes down in there with his heavy cavalry, his tanks, his 900 chariots of iron, and then they got bogged down in the flatland. And then so he lights a shuck out of there and leaves on foot by himself and goes back to Heber the Kenite's little tent that he had visited before, possibly. And then he says, I'm trying to find it. Basically, he's like, I need you to hide me out. I need some food and water. And she said, I got something better for you. Here's some warm milk. And, his tired butt went right to sleep. And then she came up in there and did something that would be, I mean, that's on the same level or to maybe another level, but the same concept as, have you ever talked with a sniper?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So what a sniper, it's different than, let's say this guy's yelling and screaming and he's coming at me and I'm defending myself, even if it's war. A sniper is going to sit there with a guy telling a joke to his friend, smoking a cigarette, and do what needs to be done. When you come up to a guy who is asleep and he's right there. Like there's no distance.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes some guts. And yeah, and then she just finished him off, stuck that tent peg right through his temple for a kill shot. And then when like the Israelite general comes up, or the men of Israel come up, like, hey, have you seen the guy? He's about this tall. He's whatever. It's like, that him. There he is. Well, the work here is done. So yeah, I love that story.
That is cool. It also, like, the brutality of that kind of death too is just like, not everyone could do that. Like, just not everyone could just like because it's we think about this all the time because we're like, this is ancient warfare and stuff we're talking about. Is we can't really properly appreciate the violence of ancient warfare, where, I mean, it's you look the person in the eye when you rip them apart, essentially, and you had to do this over and over and over again throughout the course of the afternoon, or someone was going to do it to you. And having like, wow, that's like, it's the KJV is the best, all the others.
It's right out there.
I know she's joking, but jeez, I know, but that's funny. It does sound great though, like it just flows off the tongue. It's hard, for pure poetry. Yes.
Oh,
top of the line. Can't beat it. Yeah, I can't beat it. It's fantastic. But yeah, that story, I remember like hearing the story as a kid. It's like, oh man, I just remember thinking about, like you said, the bravery of doing that, because that is one, every step of the way, you can't make any errors there. You can't, like, entering into the room, getting it in one, you can't miss, with the hammer or something like that's gonna wake him up or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
If you just like do a glancing blow on it,
right?
Just ow!
Bam, bam, bam.
Right, exactly. So, oh, that's great. So, my number 4 is another entertaining death. Let me see. Are all these going to be about? All mine aren't about deaths. Okay, I'm just checking.
This is the Bible, so
yeah, no, that's so. All right, this is the story of also out of the book of Judges, about a man named Ehud. Now, here's the story, Ehud. So, for those of you who aren't aware, Ehud was the man that was risen up by God to deliver the Israelites from the Moabites, who were under their control at the time. And the Bible goes out of its way to tell you that Ehud is left-handed. They mention it like 2 or 3 times. Like, okay, who cares? Like, why does it matter? He's left-handed. But then you find out later in the story that he used it to surprise his enemies because his dagger would have been on the opposite side. And although, man, if you think you're a professional soldier, you would be more aware of that. Like, oh yeah, some people are left-handed. I'm going to check on that. My life depends on this. I'm not going to. 80% of the population is right-handed. I'm not going to bank on this for everybody. But the story of Ehud killing the king of Moab, Eglon, is also funny for a couple of other reasons. And I selected a passage here from. Oh man, I forgot. I didn't write down the chapter, but trust me, it's in the book of Job, book of Judges somewhere.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wait, how did you know that? How did you know
that? I mean, I'm pretty familiar.
That's incredible. That's incredible. All right. So the children of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, for 18 years. But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer, Ehud the son of Gera, a Benjaminite, a left-handed man. And by him the children of Israel sent a present unto the king of Moab. I love that they call it a present. They call it a present throughout the entire chapter. And it's so funny to me that they refer to this as a present. But Ehud made him a dagger with 2 edges, about a cubit in length, and he girded upon his right thigh. And he brought the present, once again, unto Eglon, king of Moab. And Eglon was a very fat man. That's an important part of the story, apparently. And when he made an end to the offer of the present, he sent away the people that bear the present. And Ehud came to him, and he was sitting in a summer parlor. Now, summer parlor is a euphemism for bathroom. Like the king was, they even mention it later. The king was covering his feet, when you can figure out why that means bathroom. And he had himself alone. And Ehud said, I have a message from God unto thee. And he arose out of his seat. And Ehud put forth his left hand and took the dagger from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. And the haft also went in after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade. That's why they mentioned that he was a big guy, so that he could not draw the dagger out of his belly, and the dirt came out. Now, dirt is going to be another word for, the stool, the bowels, because he cut open his intestines. And then Ehud went forth through the porch and shut the doors of the parlor upon him and locked them. And what's really funny to me is after he assassinates the king, he locks the door to the bathroom. And when he was gone, his servants came and they saw that, behold, the doors of the parlor were locked. And they said, surely he covers his feet at the summer chamber. They thought he was still, on the John. And they tarried till they were ashamed. And behold, he opened the doors of the parlor. They took a key, and the king and the king was fallen before him, dead to the earth. So I love that last part where, like, okay, well, I guess the king is still on the John, and this kept waiting and waiting, and it said they waited till they were ashamed. They waited literally an embarrassing amount of time. It's okay, all right, we got to check now. Like, this is actually getting uncomfortable. He's not answering us. We need to go see what's up. And there he was, dead on the floor. That is a very funny story to me. I mean, R.I.P. King Eglon. I mean, you just happened once again, a very funny death. But yeah, that happens here.
That's one of those lines, like you could have Shakespeare or, any bit of poetry where it's sort of that's just a great line to use. Tarry till you're ashamed. That's just a good line.
It's great. It's great. It's just, I wish that they had like stopwatches, because I want to know how long they waited. I really want to know how long they sat around. I was like, man, he's what's going on? What's it, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 45?
And who among us hasn't yelled at someone in the bathroom for being in there too long? Except he's the king, so you got to just
right.
You can't just hey, come out of there. So you just sit on it until you're.
There's a giant line waiting for it to come out. Like a bunch of princes in the royal family want to go take a dump, and he's like, oh man, where is he? What's going on, man? It's very funny. It's also funny too. You ever when you're a kid, you ever go over to visit your friend's house and you like to sleep over or something, and you wake up in the middle of the night, you go to the bathroom, it's like 11 p.m., you flush the toilet, someone's like, hey, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just using the bathroom. I'm good. All right. Just leave me alone. Like, no one wants to be talked to while they're in the bathroom. And so I get it why they waited, but it's just made a very funny story 3,000 years later.
Exactly. So mine is from 1 Samuel 14. So this is so Saul and Saul and the Philistines, as you mentioned, that was between David. That was Saul was the king. This happened a little before that, but they're still fighting the same folks, the Philistines. And Jonathan and his armor bearer are out doing apparently a leader's recon of some kind. They're just out by themselves. And it says, let's see, and between the passages by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on one side and a sharp rock on the other side. And the name of the one was Bozez, the name of the other, Sina. The forefront of the one was situate northward over against Mishmash, and the other southward over against Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, come and let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. They always called them that.
They always don't miss the opportunity.
Don't miss an opportunity to let them know. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And his armor bearer said unto him, do all that is in thine heart. You talk about a good dude to be with. So, all right, I'm right with you. Come on. I like that. I like that guy. Don't even know his name, but I like it. It says, turn thee, and behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. Then said Jonathan, behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them. And if they say thus unto us, tarry until we come to you, then will we stand still in our place, and will not go up to them. And if they say thus, come up unto us, then we will go up, for the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. You can just imagine, hey, mama, here we are. And then the Philistines said, behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they've hid themselves.
They literally said, "Look who came crawling out of their hole."
Exactly. I mean, they're both like so condescending to each other. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us and we will show you a thing." We say like a thing or two.
Yep.
You know, that's the same. Like,
Same.
hey, go over, I put a spoke in your wheel, bud. And Jonathan said unto his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel." And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer slew after him. And that first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within, as it were, an half acre of land. So, I mean, they, according to the story, they do a real like point de hoc kind of a maneuver. You know, D-Day, for those not familiar, on D-Day 1944, these Rangers went right up a cliff and took out some artillery that was on top shooting at the boats. And then that really helped us when they did that. It says they went up on their hands and knees, so it's very steep at a minimum. And then they fought when they got to the top and won. Like that's pretty ballsy.
It is.
You know, I like that.
It's some real Sergeant York type stuff going on here. Like they really just
exactly.
It's really cool. And one of the lesser talked about characters in the Bible is Jonathan. And I always liked Jonathan's character as a kid, and because of stuff like that. Because Jonathan, like, he was always presented as someone who was courageous and loyal. Like those were like the two categories they have, and also. And like he had this weird strained thing because he was the king's son, but he was also David's friend, and David was destined to be king, and that was supposed to be his job. Like, but he was always loyal to David either way, and so it was pretty cool. And David had a lot of respect for Jonathan before he died and everything. So reading those stories like that is always fascinating. It is a shame that Jonathan does get lost in the shuffle a lot when it comes to those stories with, David and Saul and Samuel and all those folks. But he does deserve some more respect. So I'm glad you brought that story because I do like his character quite a bit. Yeah,
a great character. And like what you mentioned, I don't think that's happened very often in history where you have dad who feels threatened by David, who, the prophet said, "Thus saith the Lord, David will be king." Well, dad fought against it, but Jonathan said, "Well, if the Lord said he's going to be king, I support that." Like, that's amazing. That
it's weird.
Happen very often.
And unless like Jonathan just may have been smarter, like, buddy, I don't want to be king. Are you kidding me? Like, because you mentioned this, who was the story you talked about before, but Abimelech, and how he killed members of his family to get power and everything. And you read about this sometimes with, medieval or ancient history where the king will die and his sons will go to war with each other to become. And that never really made sense. It still doesn't. Because, I mean, look, how am I willing to kill my own family member to go from the number 3 spot to the number 1 spot? I'm perfectly fine with number 3. I'm perfectly fine with this. Fewer people are trying to kill me, and I'm still rich and powerful and everything. I never. So maybe Jonathan was around that vein. Like, I got a pretty good deal here. I can, and I'm gonna be friends with David. I'm cool with this. So I know this is pretty funny. Let's see. All right, so we're on number 3 now. I think was that your number 3? 5.
Yeah, and I also had David and Goliath, so really I've had.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, so my number 3 then. My number 3 is it's a sleeper in more ways than one. This is one where I was sure I wouldn't get overlap because it's pretty obscure, but it is a great story. This is this our first New Testament story? Let's see. Yeah, I think it's our first New Testament story. This one comes from the book of Acts, chapter 20, and it is about the Apostle Paul. Okay. And this is a story of Paul preaching a sermon that was so boring that it almost killed someone. And so this is from Acts chapter 20, and verse 7. It starts off, "And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. And there were many lights in the upper chamber where they were gathered together. And there sat in a window a certain man named Eutychus, being fallen into a deep sleep, as Paul was long preaching. I love that. I love that. So like anyone who grew up in church can relate to this. Like, will this guy ever shut up? This is just going on and on. And so this poor guy falls asleep during Paul's sermon. He sunk down with sleep and fell down from the third loft and was taken up dead. And Paul went down and fell on him, and embracing him said, "Trouble not yourselves, for life is still in him." When he therefore was come up again and had broken bread and eaten and talked for a long while to the break of day, he departed. And they brought the young man up because he was alive. And in the King James it says, "and were not a little comforted," which in modern English sounds like, well, they weren't too happy about this, but what it means the opposite. It means they were greatly comforted. Right. But it's very funny that I just like the guy falls. So when you read it, like I remember because when I read the story, I thought that the kid had died and that Paul had resurrected him. But that's not what it says. It says that he fell down and he was taken up dead. Like they thought he was dead, but then Paul grabbed him and said, "Oh no, he's still alive." So it doesn't seem like there was a miracle. Whatever. It's like, oh, he almost died. He fell from the third story. Of course, this is kind of dangerous, but still absolutely hilarious that Paul preached for so long and that was so dull that it either killed or almost killed this poor kid. And a story that needs to talk about way more because as a warning shot to preachers, hey folks, come on, wrap it up. Let's go. I love this story.
And to that point, maybe the funniest part of all of that is that after he had gone down, hugged him, oh, his life's still in him. It says he finished the sermon. Okay, where were we? Sorry for that distraction.
That's true. It's like if you guys think that's going to put a stop to this train, you got another thing coming.
I mean, it literally says even till break of day. So they were maybe halfway done with the sermon when Eutychus fell out of the window.
Man, that's so great. That is so great.
All right. So my, I would say this is my favorite, and I don't know. There's so many good stories. Like if you were to surprise me in the hallway and ask me this, I might give you another one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like there's some really good stories. This one is kind of special because when I was in, I guess, college, I memorized it as a theater type of a thing. So I just quoted it from the King James, and then I would do different characters for each voice. And so that was fun. To me, this is one of the first times that I remember reading the Bible and just having a fun time with it and almost studying it as an actor studies a script. Like, okay, what does he mean? What would the tone of his voice be? So I've had a lot of fun with this one. And it is from Daniel chapter 3. And it is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Good one.
In the fiery furnace. So the King Nebuchadnezzar, who was in another place, it says, not in this chapter, but it says, whom he would he slew and whom he would he kept alive. If you shot this guy a dirty look in the hallway, he could have you killed. So this was a scary dude. It was nothing funny about him. He could kill you. And he made an image, I assume to himself, based on some other stuff. I think it was an image of himself that says 90 cubits, or I'm sorry, whose height there was 60 cubits, that's 60, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. So it's a long, narrow, either an obelisk or being that it was an image, I assume it was probably Nebuchadnezzar himself, maybe. Either way, it's this golden image, and he sends out to the whole kingdom to come and worship at this image. And it says, when you hear that time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. So when the rock band starts, you better hit your face or you're going to be in trouble. So they had these 3 Hebrew guys who were captives, who believed in one true God of heaven or whatever, and not in the one of their 10 commandments is thou shalt not take unto thee any graven image, have any gods before me. So this was against their religion, literally, to even like bow down to it. Even if you're like, well, I'm not praying, I'm just bowing. They weren't even supposed to bow down to it. And so 3 guys, the music starts, the whole nation, basically everybody gathered up, falls down, and they just stand there. They're not, they're just not paying homage. Well, then to his enormous credit, Nebuchadnezzar hauls them up before him and says, did I hear you guys didn't fall down? Tell you what, I'll give you one more chance. All right. So it's like he wasn't going to jump to conclusions. Like,
yeah, these are good dudes. These are
right, that is so preposterous.
Yeah,
I can't hardly believe that kind of story. So I'll give you one more chance. So then it says, they said, nope, we're not going to do it. We're not going to bow down to your God. Go and throw us in. Our God can save us. And if not, we're still not going to bow down. So it's kind of like they were not sure what would happen. I mean, they were like, I hope the Lord will deliver us, but if not, it doesn't change anything. So then he throws them in, and according to the story, it says he had them stoke it up to 7 times hotter than usual. So apparently they usually kept a fire in there, but they stoked it good and hot, and then they cast them into the burning fiery furnace, and they like bound them up, threw them in. It says, therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So according to the story, the guards that actually brought them to the mouth of it, and I don't know if it was like a pit or whether you're shoved in like a door, I don't know. But either way, the guys that sort of, administered the execution they actually got killed. And then it says, then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonied. That's another good King James word.
Yes, it is.
Like, if you were to become like a stone, it would be like, what I mean? Like, and of course, we get astonished from that, but like that's a good name. It's right there in the word.
Yeah,
going on. Like you became like a stone. Like what? And he says, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Which is, to me, that's so funny. Like, wait a second.
Hold on.
There were 3 of them. Is that right? Why am I seeing 4?
What is the furnace manifest? Let me check this.
Exactly. That says, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. And then, so obviously, that's what he sees, and he says, well, y'all come on out. So now he's trying to be nice to them, and they come out, and it says they don't even smell like smoke. And then he goes on to make this pronouncement that if anybody says anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill. It's such a Middle Eastern.
It is. It's like ancient times. They did not mess around. Like every punishment was as brutal as possible. It's just.
So anyway, that's one of my favorites. And one thing that I found funny was I would perform it, and when I would do it in front of a crowd, like a group of students or something, which ended up, I did it several times for different size groups of people. One was like 500 or something. I did it several times. I would always I wouldn't say that it was the King James. I wouldn't say that. I would just say this is from the Bible, and I would launch into it. And without fail, I would be like, crowds of people would come up to me and be like, what version was that? Because I want to get that one because I can understand it. It was
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe that because so I remember being in, I don't know, 8th or 9th grade. And when I was first introduced to Shakespeare's, probably Macbeth, I think was the first Shakespeare thing I introduced to. And I tried reading it and I couldn't. I just couldn't. I was just like, this, like, I don't get these words. And plus it's not written like a story, it's written like a play. And so it's difficult to read. But then I watched it on TV and it was like, oh, this makes sense. All right, this makes perfect sense now. So, even if the words are words you're not familiar with, you don't understand, hearing an actual person saying it and using the emotions and the actions, it clicks. And so I can see why they thought, oh, this can't be that stuffy King James stuff. This has to be some kind of modern thing. He's like, no, exactly. He just read it the way that it's supposed to sound.
Right, exactly.
So I'm going to call an audible here. For my number 2, I had the story of Jesus and a Samaritan woman, I think, when she asks him for help, and he says that it's not proper to feed the dogs my children's food. I was gonna cut that story, makes me laugh, but right. I'm gonna switch it up to piggyback on yours. A good army term here. I want to piggyback on what the commander said. I feel like everyone uses the same 9 words in the army. I don't know what's up with that, but I'm gonna go with another story with from the book of Daniel. So the book of Daniel is a very fascinating story. There's a lot of cool stories in there. There's a story where I think Gabriel shows up to talk to Daniel and give him some news from God. He says, hey, Daniel, I would have been here like 3 days ago, but I had to fight some demons on the way. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I want to hear that story. But so the book of Daniel is about these Hebrew aristocrats were basically during the conquest. They were back in these days, what you would do, like if Jake had his his country and he conquered my country, he would kill me because I'm the king. But all of like my kids and my nobles' kids, he would just kidnap them and bring them back to his country and raise them in his culture and teach them the what's up. And so not only would they serve as ransom, because anyone who's left alive back home, you try to revolt, your kids are gone, so mind your P's and Q's, but also the kids grow up in Jake's country and they grow like the Stockholm syndrome. We're like, okay, Philipsonia isn't so bad after all, so we should really work with them. Then when they grow up, you send them back to be the governors of the. It's brilliant, actually. It's brutal, of course, but it is brilliant, and that's what happened to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they're brought over under King Nebuchadnezzar, and there's a really, I don't know what chapter it is. It's probably early on, but it's really early when the king has all of these, aristocrats that he's kidnapped and everything. And he's like, all right, so feed the boys the same thing we feed us. It's a bunch of meat and cheese and all this stuff. And Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, there's a whole chapter in there. They're saying, no, we're not eating that. And he goes, wait, what do you mean? He goes, here, instead, I want you to feed us a diet of beans, vegetables, and water. And he's like, what? He goes, yeah, that's going to be better for you. So at the end of, there's like, if you don't agree, just come check on us at the end of 60 days or something and tell us who's in better shape, us or all your guys. And at the end of those couple of weeks, turns out the guys that ate the beans, the water, and the vegetables were in better shape than those who ate the king's diet. So the king's like, all right, guess what? Now all of you are eating beans, vegetables, and water. And I remember reading that story as a kid, like, I would have hated Daniel, Shadrach,
so much. I want to throw him in the fire.
I would want to throw. I would, and this does explain to me why everyone is always after these guys, because throughout the rest of the book, these guys are always trying to get executed some way, even though the king seems to really like them. Even though you said he's always asking for advice, he's giving Shadrach a second shot and everything. Yeah, it's because when they were kids, they forced them to go on a vegetarian water diet for the rest of their lives. So I'd be pretty upset too. So I'm going to use that as my number 2, because that is a more entertaining story, and it's just very funny. The whole book of Daniel is fascinating in a lot of ways. So I like that one.
It really is. And I think, let's see, I want to say, and I think, anytime that I see a story like that, I'm like, why is that? Like, why would you have a problem with, I mean, they're basically getting fed really well. Like, what problem would they have? And I think with their deal, it was they were sacrificing this to like these false gods right in front of them, and they like couldn't. So it was for religious purposes, as opposed to like, oh, I don't like beef or whatever.
Dietary birth, yeah.
Right. It was like it was their conscience wouldn't allow them. But then on the I think basically they said, you can kill us. And I get that from verse 13, as thou seest, deal with thy servants. Like if we don't look better in 2 weeks or whatever it was, you can do whatever you want to, and from the king that could kill you.
Could
from-
do it.
Anyway, yeah, that's a great story. And yeah, like it's funny because in the third or the chapter 3, the one that I just talked about, Nebuchadnezzar didn't even see them do it. They got told on. They got tattled
right
on
at the
by
mouth.
somebody.
What right at the mouth? Yes. The same thing happens with Daniel and the lion's den, because the king's counselors come up to him and is like, hey, listen, we really should make a rule that no one can pray to anyone but you. And the king, of course, he's a king. He's an egomaniac. He says, I like the sound of that. Yeah. And so they make this a rule, and they only did it because they hated Daniel. And they knew that Daniel prayed 3 times a day towards Jerusalem or something. So once again, the king didn't know Daniel was doing this, but these narcs went over to Daniel. They saw him doing it, turned over, and the kid's like, "Oh no, I didn't know this would get my buddy Daniel in trouble." But yeah, it's just bunch of snitches they had around that entire kingdom.
It all started with them beans.
It all started with the beans. I swear, because I get it. And you know what's funny? You talked about how they were sacrificing the meat to idols and everything. Mm-hmm. There is in the book of Acts again. There is it's called it's the Jerusalem Council. It's shortly after the death and resurrection of Christ, and Peter and James and them are all talking about spreading the gospel to Gentiles. And there were no rules on this at the time. No one knew what that meant, because the sect of Christianity grew out of Judaism. So they all followed, Jewish traditions and stuff like circumcision and, all that stuff. And I remember reading the passage, and so James was the judge at the Jerusalem Council. And James said, okay, so here is my ruling on this. Gentiles who convert to Christianity, they don't have to become circumcised, but we do ask them, he said, I can't make them do this, but I do ask them to not drink blood. I remember saying, okay, were people doing that? And not eat meat sacrificed to idols. And that was I was so even and the book of Acts is thousands of years after the book of Daniel. So that was still kind of a thing that was not strong, that was not widely accepted in that culture and everything, because people would offer meat to sacrifice to idols and people would just come take it oh, well, this is just some free food here. But no, that's a no-go. No, none of us would care about this at all, but that was apparently important to them back then. So it was pretty interesting to see that.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. So was that your number one?
So that would have been my number one. And then I would have said probably David and Goliath is 2 or your 4 I think was my 2. So
oh really?
Yeah.
Oh right? Wow. I would have thought for sure that would have been. So I tried to pick an obscure one that people wouldn't get.
Well, I mean, I'm saying David and Goliath, which is everybody has at least. I mean, that's in our vernacular as far as, it's a real David and Goliath story. Even if you don't know what that means, you've heard of them. So yeah, that was one of them.
All right. So my number one, this is probably, yeah, it is my number one. My favorite story. So it is the entire story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. The story of Joseph is very long. I swear it's half the book of Genesis. It is, and by the way, there are some wild stories in the book of Genesis. Genesis is if you guys have ever just sat down and read through the book of Genesis, it is a wild, fun read. Just so many great ancient stories in there. And the book of Joseph, I only wrote down the ending because there's no way to go through everything. But try to cliff notes the whole story of Joseph is that Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob, who almost made this list. There's a bunch of great stories of Jacob too. Jacob was this close to making the list, but I didn't want to make the list too Genesis heavy. But Jacob is the 11th, or sorry, Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob, and at the time the youngest son. And he was Jacob's favorite because he was the only son of Jacob's favorite wife. And Joseph starts having these dreams. He has a dream where him and his brothers are like, I don't know, they're like collecting wheat or something and baling hay or whatever it was. And their pile of like hay started bowing down to his. And he had a dream that like there were 11 stars in the sky and the other 10 stars were bowing to his stars. And so, look, he was already the dad's favorite. And now he's here talking about, these dreams about how he's going to be, better than the rest of them. And then his dad makes him a coat of many colors, which you guys have probably heard the term Joseph, the coat of many colors. And look, dying, as in like dying, not, expiring or passing away, but like coloring your clothes was a very expensive process in these days. Like it took a lot of money to get the materials and dye them. So to dye something multiple colors, like that's something only a rich person would do. So he gave Joseph this incredibly expensive, ostentatious gift. And his brothers are just seething. They can't stand this little brat. And one day, Jacob sends his sons to go work in the fields. And then he has Joseph bring them a care package of some food, while they're working. And so 9 of his brothers get an idea and said, all right, we are going to show this kid what's up. We're going to throw him into a pit and, sell him into slavery, which like, whoa, wow, that seems kind of extreme, whatever. And the oldest brother, Reuben, says, okay, that's going a little far. I'll let the boys have their fun. They can throw Joseph in the pit, but then I'll come back and get him later. So Reuben comes back and they've already done it. They've already said, I'm sorry, bro, he's gone. And so they sell Joseph into slavery. Then there's this wild turn of events where he's enslaved. He's falsely accused by the slave master's wife. He's put into prison. He shows that God can tell him how to interpret dreams. One of the people that gets freed forgets about him until the Pharaoh has these weird dreams. He employs Pharaoh, or the Pharaoh pulls him out of prison and makes him his second in command. And he rises like from the lowest depths possible, being betrayed by his family members, the people who loves him, to the highest position he could possibly attain in the most powerful country in the Middle East and the only country that has food in the region. And this is like 20 years later. And his brothers travel down from Canaan to Egypt to buy food because there's food in Egypt. And he finds out about this. So he brings his brothers in and he's like, okay, but of course they think he's dead. They think he died decades ago. But he realizes there's 11 of them. And he realized like, oh, wow. He's like, there's another one. There's another brother here. And so I love that he invites them to dinner. He's like, oh, hey, the vizier would like to see you. And the Bible talks about he seats them in the order of their birth. And the Bible talks about like it freaks them out. They're like, wow, that's kind of weird. Like how does he know? I was like, that's just a weird coincidence that like he sat us in the order of birth here. And so they have a good dinner. They're talking to this guy who's their brother, and they have no idea that they're talking to their long lost brother. And he asked them about the family and everything and how everything's going. He says, okay, so you guys need to buy some grain? No problem. We'll hook you up. So not only does he give them grain, I think he gives them twice as much as they asked for and then sends them on their way. But before he does, he has the silver cup and he hides it in the bag of Benjamin, who's their youngest brother. And so they're halfway back home and Joseph sends, the cops out there and says, hey, the Joseph's silver cup was stolen. Did you guys take it? They say, listen, we were you guys' guests. We're very nice to you. You were nice to us. There's no way we would steal from you. It's like, nope, we're pretty sure you guys did it. And then, of course, there's that hyperbole like you talked about where it's like, and they say, listen, search all of our bags. Anybody who stole that cup, you can kill him, and the rest of us will be your slaves. Like, right, really laying it out on the table right there. And so I don't think the Bible says this, but I imagine that they also searched them in the order of birth. And then when it got to Benjamin, and then their hearts shattered because like, oh no, the old man. And so they go back to Joseph and they say, listen, you cannot imprison or execute this child because like he is our father's favorite son. He had another favorite son who was the youngest, who's dead, and it would kill our father if you killed this boy. You can't do. It's like you can take any one of us, but don't harm this child. And Joseph, hold on, let me actually read what it says. After that happens, then Joseph could not refrain himself before all that stood before him, and he cried. It caused every man, he said, cause every man to go out from me. He told everyone to leave the room. And there stood no man with him while Joseph made himself known to his brethren. And he wept aloud, and all the Egyptians of the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brothers, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. So obviously, like they tried to kill this guy 20 years ago, basically. So they are not feeling quite as happy as Joseph is right now. And Joseph noticed this. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore, be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. And he goes on to tell them, what you did back in those days, you guys meant for evil, but God used it so that I could do some good. And I don't hold any grudge against you. I'm happy that, not only is the old man alive, but that you are treating Benjamin better than you treated me. And you're all free to come down here and live in Egypt and have plenty of food and safety for the rest of your lives. And I love that story. I just like start to finish. It is an excellent narrative. And it's also, I was talking to somebody the other day. The story of Joseph is one of the few Bible stories with like a major character where the character doesn't have like this huge flaw or something. Like there's usually something like with David, tons of stuff David did, or Solomon or everything. The only thing you could actually knock Joseph for was he was kind of an arrogant brat when he was younger with the whole bragging to his brothers. But who wasn't that way when you were 16? But yeah, that I think that is my favorite Bible story with Joseph, that it's incredibly moving, and that Joseph was able to forgive them after all that they had done to him. It just it means a lot to me.
Yeah, that I agree. That's a phenomenal story. And yeah, he didn't do anything, even by our standards, that was egregious morally, other than just being an annoying little prick.
Yeah.
Hey guys, look what Dad got me. Oh, by the way, in my dream, y'all are bowing down.
Right. I know. That's the one thing. That's the one thing I can knock him for. But he was a child. I mean, come on. It's like if that's the worst thing that you did, and like once again, like this is an ancient world where it's incredibly brutal. Come on, that's not too bad, So I felt very bad for him in the part of the story when he's interpreting the dreams for the butler and the baker, and the butler forgets about it. I was like, how did you forget this? Like, do you run across people who can interpret dreams all the time? Like, this is just like something that you just like, oh yeah, that's right. A few years ago, there was that Joseph guy. So yeah, I love the story of Joseph, and it's unfortunate that the story does end end. It doesn't end sad. Joseph's story isn't end sad, but the Hebrews moved down to Egypt, but then they end up getting enslaved, hundreds of years later. Not Joseph's fault or anything. But I did like that in the book of Exodus, when it talks about the departure of the Hebrews out of Egypt into Canaan, that they made it a point to gather up Joseph's bones because Joseph asked to be buried in his home. It's like, oh, that's really sweet. Like that's a callback that I didn't even know I needed. Like, oh right. Man, they tied a bow in the Joseph story. I love that. So yeah, Joseph is one of my favorite characters in the entire Bible. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. That's a phenomenal story.
That is good stuff. So that was great, man. That was fun. I feel like we should do that again with with maybe more specialized topics then, like funniest Bible stories, or or most ironic. Like the Abimelech one is great for that one. It's fantastic.
Haman from the book of Esther.
Haman was on my list too.
That's one of the ones to me. The Esther is my Joseph story. Like that whole book.
Yeah,
it's pure comedy. It's pure irony. It's pure like, wow, that's some balls. There's so much good stuff in Esther. We should. Yeah,
Esther was on the list too. I had Esther on the list, and I learned something because I was reading over it. Because I refresh myself with the stories and everything. I mean, I do know them, but we can all learn all refresher stuff. But I knew that Mordecai was Esther's. I thought he was Esther's uncle, but I was wrong. He was her cousin, and not only was he her cousin, but it says like in the first couple of verses that his Esther was his cousin, but her parents had died when she was little. So he adopted her as his daughter. So he was like her dad too. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that he raised her and everything. So I was like, oh, but yeah, I love it when someone plans evil and then it gets their comeuppance in the same way they planned it. Like, hey man, I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
It's so
poetic justice. Yeah.
it's so funny. It's so fantastic. Oh, well, that's great. We almost made exactly an hour. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's what
that was
we're
good.
trying to
That
go
was a good
for.
time.
That's good stuff, man. Well, hey, if you guys don't follow the Culture Bumpkin on TikTok and or YouTube, I recommend that you do so. Fantastic guy. The best part about being a content creator is meeting other great content creators like this. And someone just recommended him to me one day, and I've loved it ever since. And you guys will be seeing us doing more of this stuff in the future. So thanks a lot. But Jake, any thing you want to leave the people with?
Oh, not really. It's always a pleasure. You're a great conversationalist. I love the fact that, you know, I think this is, you know, conversations with you are proof that like we disagree on plenty of stuff, but that there's, I think you can agree with somebody on more stuff than you disagree with, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like politically, I'm usually pretty right, or maybe not even right, but like middle to right, I would say. But like that doesn't matter.